Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. We're now halfway through October, so winter's gonna be here before you know it. Depending on where you live, temperatures may have already started to drop, and if they haven't, they're going to soon. And when seasons change, it's always a good idea to make sure that your preps are set up to deal with those changes. So today we're going to talk about 7 things that every prepper should take care of ASAP to make sure that they're ready for this coming winter. One of the most important things to have for any emergency is food and water. And if you're preparing specifically for something like a snow win or some other winter weather event, the good news is you don't have to go too extravagant. While most of us would want to have a little bit more, even a relatively small 2-week supply of food should be enough to get you through most storms. So if you're just starting out, getting what you need is actually pretty attainable. Having even simple things like canned goods and peanut butter on hand can make a very big difference. Those are nice since they require little or no preparation and they can give you some variety in your diet. Then other things like granola bars and trail mix are good to have for snacks. I've actually used big bags of trail mix on multi-day camping trips as sort of my breakfast/snack food, and they worked really well for that since trail mix is high in protein and calories. Freeze-dried meals and dried beans and rice are also viable options, but they do require additional water to prepare. Freeze-dried meals in bags don't need too much, usually it's less than 16 ounces, but it's still something to be aware of. Dried beans and rice, though, are going to require quite a bit. I just did a video on water storage last week, so I'm not going to go too deep into that, but one of the most important things to remember during the winter months is that your water needs to be accessible from inside of your home. Prepackaged water bottles and portable water containers are good options for this. Outdoor sources like rainwater harvesting systems can freeze, so be sure to drain them at least enough so that ice won't damage your barrels or the pipes connecting them. Then also have alternate ways to cook off grid, especially if you have electric appliances. Gas stoves will probably still work during short-term local power outages, but you could lose gas utilities if there are power outages or infrastructure damage over a large area. So because of this, it's still a good idea to have backup cooking methods. Propane and butane camp stoves are the most basic and easy to use. However, with butane, keep in mind that it won't vaporize at 31 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. If you have a wood-burning fireplace, you could purchase cranes and grates that would allow you to grill meat or suspend large pots over your fire. Having one or more ways to cook, though, will allow you to prepare your food and also melt snow or boil water if your existing water storage runs out. Next thing to take care of before this winter is heating and energy preps. When it comes to backup power for things like refrigerators, freezers, and personal devices, you have a few different options. Traditional fuel-based generators work well for powering larger appliances for an extended period of time. As long as you have fuel for them, they should be able to run with very little downtime in between. Small solar options are a good choice for keeping personal devices or sensitive electronics working long term. They're also nice since they can be used indoors, which is useful for certain pieces of medical equipment like CPAPs or humidifiers. Larger whole home solar options are becoming more common, but to get the most out of those, they need to be paired with roof-mounted solar panels. While snow should melt off of your panels pretty quickly, it's still a good idea though to have at least a small fuel-based generator to serve as a backup for times where your panels aren't collecting a whole lot of sunlight. However, regardless of whether you use gas, solar, or some combination of the two, I don't recommend using those kinds of power sources for running things like electric space heaters. Those just use way too much power, and in the case of solar, they'll drain your batteries very quickly. So for staying warm, your best options are probably going to be wood-burning stoves or fireplaces and propane space heaters. I've been using buddy heaters since I was a kid for things like hunting and camping trips, and what I like about them is that they're easy to use, and if you're careful, they're also reasonably safe. These come in a few different sizes. I covered them in a video that I did about this time last year, but mine is just sort of the standard size regular buddy heater. Buddy heaters can run on 1 pound propane bottles or can be connected to a larger cylinder using an adapter hose. I do recommend getting a fuel filter if you're going to be connecting it to a larger cylinder, since those types of heaters can be a little bit finicky and they can get clogged up with oil if you use cheaper hoses. Some people haven't had an issue with this, but it can happen. Also, when connecting a buddy heater to a larger cylinder, turn the knob on the tank slowly. If you don't, the heater may light, but it could go out a few seconds later. Then you can also use some other ways to stay warm. Good quality cold weather clothing and blankets are things everyone should have. I prefer to use wool whenever possible, but there are some decent synthetic options out there as well. Small items like hot hands and Zippo hand warmers can also help you stay a little more comfortable. Then the next thing to take care of before this winter is backup lighting. LED flashlights, headlamps, and lanterns are my go-tos year-round. They're bright, energy efficient, and they're also very safe. Many of them can be recharged directly from a backup power source, and those that can't tend to use common battery types that have rechargeable variants. So if you have a solar power option, you should be able to keep them running almost indefinitely. But for the winter months, you may also want to consider using other lighting methods. Things like candles and oil lamps don't produce nearly as much light as LED options will. However, they do produce small amounts of heat. While it's not going to be enough to warm a house or a larger room, it can help take the edge off the cold in smaller areas. Oil lamps and hurricane lanterns can run on kerosene, clean heat, or paraffin lamp oil, but they do produce a very distinctive odor that may bother some folks. Candles tend to have less odor, and the odor it does have is caused by scents added to them, but they're less safe than oil lamps and hurricane lanterns since they don't have an enclosed flame. Candle lanterns are a good alternative since the candles are enclosed. The main disadvantage to these, though, is that the candles for them tend to be expensive and they're not something that you can just walk into most big box stores and buy. Another thing to take care of before this winter is to make sure that you have plenty of fuel for all of your different pieces of gear and equipment. I think that a lot of preppers make the mistake of spending money on something like, just for example, a generator, but don't follow up and store enough fuel for it to last through an emergency. Regardless of if you have a generator or not, it's a good idea to have at least some gasoline on hand. Even if you don't plan on driving, you can use your car to power things like cell phones and also some larger things if you have an inverter like this one. Then if you have camp stoves, heaters, or a dual fuel generator, be sure to have plenty of propane on hand. Propane's my favorite fuel to store since it can be used in a lot of different things and it has a much longer shelf life than gasoline or diesel. But if you're using any fuel source with multiple pieces of equipment, be sure to take that into consideration when you're calculating how much fuel that you're going to need. If you're using it for several things, it could run out a lot quicker than what you're expecting. If you have a wood stove or wood-burning fireplace, be sure to have plenty of firewood and also have kerosene or lamp oil if you plan on using oil lamps or hurricane lanterns. Also be sure to have plenty of batteries for flashlights and radios, along with USB battery banks for charging cell phones and other electronics. And y'all, I've included these and a lot of other important preps in my ultimate stockpile checklist. It's free for anyone who signs up for my newsletter, and you can do that using the link in the description below. But one thing that a lot of people overlook when it comes to winter preparedness is safety. A lot of gear and equipment that people use during power outages can cause fires and produce carbon monoxide. And these are very real threats. A few years ago, we had a house burned down in our neighborhood during the 2021 Texas ice storm, and every year we hear about people getting killed by carbon monoxide. A lot of times this is caused by someone trying to run a generator in like their garage or just way too close to their home. So be sure that you know how to operate all of your equipment safety and don't take shortcuts. If you don't have an extension cord that's long enough to allow you to run your generator a safe distance from your home, then go out and get a longer cord now while you're thinking about it. Also, don't forget common sense things like keeping candles, lamps, and heaters away from drapes, blankets, paper, or anything else that could catch on fire. Having fire extinguishers and fire blankets on hand can give you a better chance of being able to put out fires before they get out of control. And when getting a fire extinguisher, get the largest one that you can afford and make sure that it's rated A, B, C. This means that it can put out fires caused by normal debris like wood or paper, and also others caused by liquids or electricity. I was able to pick up this fire blanket from a local hardware store, and these are nice for things like grease fires since you won't have to hose down half of your kitchen to put out a fire. Then also be sure that you have plenty of smoke alarms. These should be placed in and outside of bedrooms, hallways, and every level of your home. Battery operated ones are good since they'll continue to operate even if the power stays out for an extended period of time. If you already have those, now is a good time to replace their batteries and test them out. Then also be sure to have carbon monoxide alarms. Like smoke alarms, I prefer the battery operated ones since they'll continue to operate during a power outage. And aside from all that, also have a well thought out fire evacuation plan that everyone in your family knows about and has practiced. The next thing to take care of before this winter is basic home maintenance. And one of the biggest ones is trimming trees that are close to your home. This is a big deal if you live somewhere like I do that has a ton of pine trees. Ice and snow can accumulate on branches and cause them to snap off. While that can happen to any tree, pine trees tend to struggle more since they have long branches that really aren't very strong. Falling branches can knock holes in your roof, damage vehicles, and they can even kill folks if they land on them. Trimming branches that are hanging over your house or just getting rid of unwanted trees can reduce the chances of those kinds of accidents. Then another common issue during the winter months is frozen pipes. This is a bigger problem for pipes running along the exterior of your home or for like standalone spigots in your yard. Turning off the water to those and draining them is a good way to prevent this from happening, but it isn't always practical. If you can't shut off the water to just those, then using things like faucet covers or heating tape can work as well. But it's still a good idea to have a water shutoff tool on hand in case a pipe does burst. That way you'd be able to shut the water off to prevent further damage to your home. Then if you have a fireplace or wood-burning stove, now would be a good time to get it inspected to make sure that it's safe to use. Even though this isn't a safety issue, fixing drafts on doors and windows can help you save money on utility bills and help your home stay warmer during a power outage. Now is a good time to replace worn or damaged weather stripping or redo caulking, but if you're unable to do that before a power outage, things like painter's tape can be used to seal up those gaps, at least temporarily. It's also a good idea to have some basic tools on hand to help you deal with situations that could come up. Chainsaws, for example, are useful if you have large limbs or trees fall around your property, and hatchets and axes can be used to process firewood. Then the next thing to take care of before this winter is your vehicle. Winterizing your car can help make sure that it stays running through the colder months, and doing things like keeping an eye on your tires can help you stay safe. Having an air compressor either at your home or in your vehicle itself can help you deal with the inevitable tire pressure light that's going to show up when temperatures start to drop. It's also a good idea to have some survival basics in your vehicle at all times, in addition to standard things like food and water. Also keep other things in there like blankets and emergency candles. Last year I did a full video showing how to set up an emergency kit for your car, and you can find that by clicking here. Or if you want to see how to develop a water plan for different kinds of emergencies, then click here. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.